Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering news of the Church. It is Wednesday, March 30, 2022. On the 25th, the Pope, together with bishops from all over the world, consecrated Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary and prayed for the end of the war. With the reform of the Vatican Curia, carried out by the Pope, Opus Dei will no longer depend on the dicastery of bishops, but on the dicastery of the clergy. The Pope has sharply criticized those European countries that are increasing their defense spending by seeing what is happening in Ukraine. The Spanish bishops have published a doctrinal note defending the right to morally object on the part of healthcare personnel. On the 25th, the solemnity of the Incarnation of the Lord, the Pope consecrated Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary and called for the end of the war.
On Friday, the 25th solemnity of the Incarnation of the Lord, the Pope consecrated Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary during a penitential celebration in St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican. At the same time, this consecration took place in Fatima by Cardinal Krawiecki. On March 2nd, in a letter to the Pope, the Ukrainian bishops begged the Pope, in these hours of immeasurable pain and terrible ordeal for our people, to make this consecration as the Blessed Virgin Mary asked at Fatima. The Holy Father accepted this request, and on the 25th this consecration took place, together with the majority of the bishops and millions of faithful. In the apparition of July 13, 1917 at Fatima, Our Lady had asked for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart, stating that if this request was not heeded, Russia would spread its errors throughout the world, promoting wars and persecutions of the Church. After the apparitions of Fatima, there were several acts of consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, but it was not until 1984 that St. John Paul II made that consecration in a way that was considered valid by Sister Lucia, the seer of Fatima who was still alive. However, it didn't explicitly mention Russia.
Opus Dei, the only personal prelature in the Church, will no longer depend on the dicastery of bishops, but on the dicastery of clergy.
Bishop Fernandez Ocaris, prelate of Opus Dei, considered it necessary to reassure the faithful of the prelature about the change that affects the work, especially in the Apostolic Constitution Predicate Evangelium, the text by which Pope Francis has reformed the Curia. According to Bishop Ocaris, the ordinary interlocutor with the Holy See changes. Many of the matters that the prelature habitually deals with the Roman Curia are related to its presbyterate, but the substance of the prelature of Opus Dei, made up of laity and priests, women and men, as established in the statutes that the Apostolic See gave to the work, is not modified in any way. Although, theoretically, the modification does not imply more than a change of interlocution, as the prelate of Opus Dei points out, it will undoubtedly make it more difficult to understand its juridical nature. This has already been pointed out by some specialists, such as the doctor in canon law and Jesuit Gianfranco Ghirlanda. With the Apostolic Constitution ut sit, John Paul II erected Opus Dei as a personal prelature in 1982 and ordained the first two prelates as bishops.
In the face of what is happening in Ukraine, several European countries have increased their defense spending. The Pope has strongly criticized this measure.
Last Thursday, in an address to a group of women, the Pope criticized the increase in defense spending that has been approved in several European countries, including Germany, Italy, and Spain. Although the Pope did not name any country, the allusion to these nations was clear. The pontiff declared that he is ashamed that some states are seeking to raise defense spending to 2% of their GDP and called the increase in spending madness. That did not please the Pope, not at all. I have been ashamed when I read that a group of states committed to spend this amount to buy weapons as a response to what is happening. It is madness, the Holy Father lamented. The real answer, therefore, is not more weapons, more sanctions, more political military alliances, but a different approach, a different way of governing the world, now globalized, and of shaping international relations. He also said, thus rejecting the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia.
In the face of threats to conscientiously objection by healthcare personnel, the Spanish bishops have issued a statement in their defense.
The conscientious objection of doctors and other health personnel is in danger. Even the World Health Organization is calling for its restriction to the point of its virtual abolition. In view of this, the Spanish bishops integrated in the Permanent Commission have published a doctrinal note in its defense, which can serve as a reference to other episcopates. For some decades now, says the communiqué, we have been witnessing a process of passing laws in which human life is gravely unprotected. It is a process that has not ended, as these laws become more radical because behaviors that were previously decriminalized are now considered rights. Conscientious objection by those who oppose these practices becomes more difficult. When the public authorities set themselves up as disseminators of a certain ideology or promoters of certain moral values that are opinionated, they are overstepping the limit of their mission, says the Spanish bishops. Conscientious objection also has its limitations. One cannot object to any law, but only to those laws that attack essential elements of one's religion or those that undermine the foundations of human dignity and coexistence based on justice, they add. The duty of the state to recognize this right and not to discriminate against those who exercise it is parallel to the obligation of Christians to avoid any kind of direct material or formal cooperation with those acts that attack the right to life, and any action that could be interpreted as cooperation, however indirect, or approval of these acts.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on Poland's generosity in welcoming refugees and the silence of the media in the face of this generous action.
The consecration of Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary has been a success. Together with the Pope, from whom the initiative was taken, millions of Catholics, and certainly the entire world episcopate, have carried out this consecration. What Our Lady asked at Fatima has been fulfilled, and I'm sure that the result will be extraordinary. It's also served to demonstrate that still within the Catholic people there is a great faith. We are no longer in the time of St. John Paul II, when that faith was like a living fire that burned and illuminated the whole world. Now we are as if we were what remains after that fire, some embers, some coals covered by ashes. But this response of the Catholic people to the Pope's request has served to demonstrate that those embers, if the ashes are removed from them and they are blown a little and some dry firewood is placed next to them, they can become again a great fire that lights up everyone in the house. There is hope for Ukraine and Russia. And there is hope also for the Catholic Church, and of course always, and only if we are by the hand of the Blessed Virgin Mary. But while what Our Lady promised in Fatima is fulfilled and that conversion takes place, the miracle of the conversion of the hearts of the warlords, Ukraine cities continue to be bombed. Thousands of civilians are killed. Millions have to flee their homes. And that tragedy, which has been going on for more than a month now, seems to have no end and even threatens to spread to other countries. Now, what is happening in Ukraine, this dreadful war, should not make us forget that there is another war. Maybe someone thinks that we should not compare both things. I repeat, what is happening in Ukraine is horrible. It has no justification, but it's not the only one. Every year, 73 million people are killed in the womb of their mothers, which has become the most dangerous place for human beings. Every year there are 73 million abortions in the world. Induced abortions, not spontaneous abortions. 73 million babies cannot be born. And besides, in many cases, this is legal and even a big business. That is another war that is not talked about. Not only that, but also, at least in some countries, at least the vast majority of the population is in favor of this killing of innocents. And they want to turn it, if they have not already done so, into a right. The absurdity is reaching the point that can be reached in one of the American states, Maryland, in which the legislators of that state are promoting a law in which if the baby has survived the abortion, it can be left to die, that is, killed after birth. They are promoting infanticide, after abortion infanticide, all legal, all business, or subsidized with taxpayers' money. What is happening in Ukraine is horrible. But the killings of innocents with abortion are also horrible, and almost nobody wants to look at them. As for Ukraine, the disaster, something positive is also taking place within that misfortune. The millions of refugees who have had to flee the country are being welcomed, especially in neighboring countries, and in a special way in Poland. Poland has sheltered more than 2 million Ukrainian refugees, and most of them have been received in their homes by Polish families, guided by their priests. The Catholic Church in Poland is doing a spectacular job of welcoming the Ukrainians. And why is this not talked about? Why is it not news? Spain has so far received around 15,000 Ukrainian refugees. Italy, 40,000. Germany, 200,000. The United States says they will receive about 100,000. Poland has 2 million. In each country, the media are excited with those refugees who arrive. and are very proud to show the solidarity of their own countries. But Poland is not talked about. Poland, that carries more refugees than the rest, all the rest of the world together, is the great unknown. And why? We need to ask ourselves, because curiously, that country which the West likes to mistreat because it is anti-abortion, because they say that their laws are anti-LGBT, that country is the most welcoming to those who come fleeing the tragedy of war. That Catholic country, because it is Catholic, rejects abortion. And because it is Catholic, opens the doors of their homes to those who have lost everything, because it is Catholic. But because it is Catholic, the example is given remains unknown. It is not interesting to talk in the West about what Poland is doing with the victims of the war in Ukraine. It is a tremendous hypocrisy, the one that is lived in many Western countries, tearing their clothes about the horrifying images that every day the media show us over and over again, but not saying anything about the massacres of abortion, and not saying anything about the fact that a Catholic country that rejects abortion is the country that, with more generosity, is the one that is helping those who have lost everything. That is hypocrisy. Let us ask the Lord, through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, of her Immaculate Heart, let us ask the Lord to end the war in Ukraine. We trust that the consecration that we have made united to the Pope will bring about this result, will produce this miracle. Let us ask the Lord through Our Lady's intercession for this miracle. But let us also ask for an end to the slaughter of abortion. And let us ask that in the West we may not be so hypocritical as not to want to see the good done by those who are Catholic, while we take pride in the little good things we do ourselves. See you next week, God willing.
If you would like to keep up to date with what is happening in the church, you can visit our news page, www.magnificat.tv. See you next week, God willing.